As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Tia Story, and the Grappling Growth podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy.
Tia, pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So we're here. Tia, I'm curious, what does growth look like to you?
Well, growth to me is interesting because obviously I'm trying to grow my startup, Evaluate 180, but I'm trying to grow people. I want people's lives to develop and change and have them live with meaning and purpose. So when you can establish what you value in life and figure out what's getting in the way, i.e. through unconscious bias, you are achieving growth because you're just moving into a place where you can live with meaning and purpose.
When you say unconscious bias, what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, unconscious bias was essentially kind of came about, or at least a name was put to it by a guy named Daniel Kahneman. And Daniel Kahneman, obviously, right, about thinking fast and slow, and won Nobel Prize for behavioral economics, right? And essentially, it's those little behaviors that live kind of just beneath the surface of all of us. We all do them. They're natural. They often can derail us sometimes with some of our behaviors. But when they're honed, or we just fix a little bit of the behavior changes, or you just notice, you can start to use it in a more effective way. As we get further into our discussions, I could even give you a few examples that's in our model. Give you one now if you want.
Yeah.
One that I often see, amidst a lot of finance types, is the torrent blocker. So that's rushing ahead, reach a decision, come to a conclusion without any collaboration. Okay. That's literally it's going to the I instead of the we. If you're working with people and you have that unconscious bias, it's just, you're excited. This sits in our openness zone in Evaluate 180. So those are values that support, excitement, curiosity, adventure. A lot of sales types are sometimes sit in this zone. They're chasing that win, that conclusion. And sometimes when you forget about the we, it brings clouded judgment. It leaves a team feeling off balance. So it's noticing. My model, the Evaluate 180 model, is built in mindfulness first. Essentially, it's kind of three-pronged, right? It's being present, opening up, and doing what matters. And being present is part of noticing. And unconscious bias is all about noticing. And so in the activities, in order to first get started with my model, I'm asking people to really contemplate what their values are in a choice fashion. They have to bring 52 values down to 8, which is very difficult in 24 minutes. And people ask, well, why just can I pick my top 8? Well, because that's not real life. I'm trying to mimic the tough decision-making moments in our life when our values don't even come into our consciousness until we have important things to decide, So what I'm doing here is when you only have 24 minutes and you have, a certain amount of minutes for each removal round, I'm asking you to make hard choices in an allotment of time. And it creates this pressure, but that's real life, right? And then in the next activity, I'm asking people, okay, these are the most common biases that I'm seeing among humankind. There's about hundreds and hundreds of biases.
What are the most common biases you see?
Well, across my model, I would say in what I call my global vision zone. So I have 4 biases that sit in each zone, and we have 4 zones to my model. And the bias is supported by values in that zone. And there's 12 values, actually 13, because it shares a half a value on each of the borders. It's got 2 axes in a circle, the model. So something in global vision is the shoulder blocker. That's, somebody like the values that sit in global vision are like kindness, compassion, all those things you're giving to the outside world, collaboration, right? Really wanting to, part of the we, not so much the I would say. A common one in that space is the shoulder blocker, a person that's taking on everybody else's issues. You see that in the workplace sometimes?
What exactly is a shoulder blocker?
The shoulder blocker is that you're shouldering everyone's issues. And what's happening then is it's preventing you from a lot of your own personal achievements and blocking values, what I would say, across the axis in the zone that sits diagonal. And the zone that sits diagonal from global vision is personal empowerment. That's more the I. That's things all related to self-improvement, prosperity, money, beauty, all of those, what we're in pursuit of, all the time. Humility, things that, make us better, right? So those are always kind of working against one another, kind of like this shoulder and that shoulder, not necessarily good or bad. It's just values competing for attention in our life. And it's happening all the time, every day, and we don't necessarily even know it. And that's why we have these things called unconscious bias. Another one in that zone, and let's talk about in the global vision zone, would be the idealism blocker. Okay, there's a lot of people in this world, I'll think about it in the workplace, of like idea of when it comes review time and you're hoping to get that promotion or you're hoping to get a bigger raise than you did the previous year. And you go into this meeting or go into this review session and you really expect that your boss, the people the people that you are reporting to are going to remember and appreciate and think of all the things that you've done all year. Unfortunately, humility is great, but you have to have self-advocacy too. The idealism blocker is thinking that the world just exists in a place where people are going to remember me, respect me, and I'm going to get what I deserve. Unfortunately, you don't want to be a jerk and be out there bragging all the time, but you have to have some humble self-confidence.
You're only as good as what you're doing at the present moment. And I think you see this with a lot of sports athletes, whereby they might have won a title or a trophy 5 years ago, and that's probably one of the few fields where that's still respected.
Right.
But it's about what you're doing in the present time. Right. And there's so many cases of that. And I think a lot of people sit on their laurels, and that's the difference between having a good season, a great period, versus being a legacy piece or massively remembered in what you do.
I studied Wall Street and personal values in order to create my dissertation because I just found them an interesting lot of humans, because I felt like they were, many had achieved what everybody would consider happiness and success, right? Because they have money and they have material possessions, and many of them have healthy families, but still see a lot of unhappiness. And so that's what kind of drove me to that.
Why do you think those people are unhappy?
Well, because I think that they expect that money equals happiness, right? And I think that happiness has been studied over and over again. And happiness isn't about money. It's about living with meaning and purpose. Am I achieving the things I want to achieve in this life that aren't always equated exactly with dollars? I mean, let's not be have rose-colored glasses on here. We need to make money. We need to, support families. We need to pay our rent. That's all understandable. But there are many hours in the day. And if we're not getting meaning and purpose in our work life, then we certainly can find those values that we're ignoring or have forgotten about, or actually are being blocked by unconscious bias. Find those things, bring them back into our lives, find meaning and purpose. I mean, it's been studied. I mean, happiness experts, scholars, found that happiness outside of security, safety, and just basic needs like Maslow's needs is about $75,000 American dollars a year for happiness. Now you have small increases in happiness up to about $500,000 American dollars, but with diminishing returns. Essentially, each euro, dollar, pound you earn, you get less and less happiness from that. And it really comes down to, oftentimes, is a lot of great scholars, entrepreneurs, very successful people who've written books about it. They actually had to subtract things from their life in order to go back to finding that happiness. Hence, another reason why I ask people to remove the values that are least important to them in order to finally get to their final 8 values.
I think as well, to your point, when you've got so many things you're working on, it's similar to analysis paralysis. When you've got 20 different options, you start struggling to pick what you really enjoy. Right. I remember a few years ago, I was traveling around New Zealand and my suitcase was lost in transit from Bali to Australia to New Zealand.
Not a good thing.
You think that then, and again, it's perspective. So initially I thought, it's not a good thing. Oh shit. But then in that period, I had 6 weeks where I went to the comparison of Sports Direct over here, Decathlon, just picked up the most minimal clothes because I thought, I only need clothes for 3 or 4 days.
Right, that's all I need.
And it took 6 weeks to come. And I rotated between 4 pairs of boxer shorts, 4 socks, 4 t-shirts, 4 shorts, and a jumper.
Right.
And it was so easy every day. And I was in the back of the camper van, just opening up a bag and just being like, I'll take the blue top today, or I'll take the black top today. Simplicity. Right. It wasn't decisions that
exactly
are difficult.
Right, because when you go on when you go on a trip, and especially a trip where you really want to, it's a holiday that you've been looking forward to, and you really want to relax and enjoy it. Even holidays become, filled with competition and stress and all of these things. But what you're saying is exactly true. You took out all of kind of the frivolous nature of what really was going on, and you were just living in those moments with the few items that you had. I mean, I love, we have a beautiful place in London here, and it's small. It's like 1,500 square feet for having 3 daughters and boyfriends and husbands that sometimes come. We weren't planning on living there. It was just like our pied a terre when we were going to be in London and then spending more time in the U.S., but we're not. We're both working and living more in London, my husband and myself. And the space doesn't matter to me. It's really that I'm living and working in the city that I love most, right? I mean, and that's really just as simple as losing it. That's a great example. I mean, I'm going to use that in some of my presentations, you know?
So you were speaking about purpose.
Yeah.
At this stage of your life, what do you feel gives you purpose now?
I think in this stage of my life, in fact, when people have often asked me, why did you decide, to start this business? I mean, I was 50 when I decided to go back to school, and I promised myself I would never return to school.
What did you
because
study?
I was a lawyer originally, and it was difficult. You get a Juris Doctorate in the U.S., and it's not a fun experience. I love what it gave me. But then I went back and studied organizational psychology because I was an employment lawyer and I saw the acrimony when there's a lawsuit. There's always a disgruntled person that had been terminated and a boss that said that they were malingerers. There's always two sides. I was representing the boss that was calling everyone a malingerer. It wasn't that fulfilling for me. And what I found in my own workplace is I was a little bit of that shoulder blocker. I was spending all of my time as an early young associate helping others deal with harassing partners, having too much work from colleagues or a few years in front of them. And I asked the law firm if I could come back after my first child as a liaison between the associates and the management committee because there was a big communication gap and they needed to understand what was going on with the young new members of their firm. So that was one of those things that was always kind of nagged at me. I did different things along the way. I've had a consulting business for hiring people. I did it in the finance world. My husband was in that world.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a recruiter for a little while. I taught at universities, but this was nagging me and I didn't want to be shoulda, coulda, woulda. So I was like, I am going to school. I needed another degree because I had to really learn the lingo of organizational psychology, and I needed it in order to build my model. I will tell you, my law degree is what made me be able to build something as sophisticated as I did that now is AI driven, and I have a mathematician that's a co-founder, but it was something I wanted to leave this world, whether I make a dime or a pence or whatever it is, whether it's a pound or a dollar. I wanted to leave the world with a model or positive psychology or a happiness model that people could use for themselves, that they could figure out what was important to them and move forward. It was built on positive psychology because I didn't want to be a counselor or a psychologist or go back to do that specifically because, there's a lot of great people doing that. I wanted it to be user friendly because I believe looking at different crises in my own life and my daughters and just my family and friends, we can't change what's gone on behind us, but we can move forward in a more positive way. And when we isolate those things that are most important to us, and then we make committed actions in furtherance of those things, we start to live better.
You've alluded to it on our previous conversation before here. Your daughter, can we talk about her?
Yeah. My youngest daughter.
Can you just expand upon
sure.
what
My
you shared with
youngest
me?
daughter, actually, when I just gave a talk at the Irish Funds in Dublin, and I talked about how meaning and purpose for me was very personal, it was very real. My husband's career was taking off. He was a lawyer as well. We met in law school, and he was the general counsel of a hedge fund and a market making business, but they were always pulling him onto the trading desk. It's very rare for a lawyer to become a risk taker. Well, that's what he did. And as he was making that transition, we found out that our youngest daughter at that age 2 was diagnosed with a rare deadly cancer. And it was tough. She lost an eye.
What was the cancer?
She had something called retinoblastoma. And so it was chaotic, right? But then everything's stripped down to what's necessary. And it comes down to perseverance, humility, but for the grace of God go I, right? This could be any of us, any of our children, any of our parents. Health doesn't discriminate, right? Just kindness, just spirituality, those things. There was a light shined on those things, and I always thought that I've always enjoyed making other people happy and living in the moment because I do enjoy my daily living. But when life stops you in its tracks, and we all have suffering, it makes you think, wow, this is this is important. And I guess I've always thought of suffering as a blessing in many ways. I wouldn't wish it upon others, and just other terrible things that may have happened to some of my other daughters in life. I'm like, we can't connect the dots right now, but you will be a better writer, a better friend, because my oldest daughter's a writer. Whatever happens to us, we don't understand the reasons why, but we put it together when we look backwards.
That's it, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
again.
sure.
But I love Stoic philosophy. And
yeah. Oh, yeah, you mentioned that. I love that. And I'm going to look at some of those books that you mentioned to me. Yes. Yep.
Have you?
I haven't yet, but I looked. I looked on Amazon. I think I can purchase it on Amazon. Yeah. So make sure I'm going to get it now.
Good. They talk about. I don't know if it's that book specifically, but just the literature around Stoicism. But they talk about suffering, as you say. There's two camps of suffering. You've got chosen suffering and unchosen suffering. So what happened to your daughter there? That's unchosen suffering.
Right.
You don't, as you said, you don't wish for it to happen.
No.
But these things happen in life. And as you said, health problems, health issues, they don't discriminate. The wealthiest people in the world, Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Look at him. And it doesn't matter who you are. If there isn't enough medical research or someone has stage 4 cancer and there's nothing they can do, then unfortunately that is it. But then you've got the camp of chosen suffering. So these are the things that we do in our daily lives that means that when the unchosen suffering happens, we're just a bit more battle tested. It doesn't mean that we're going to be bulletproof.
No.
But we're in a position whereby when said travesty or event happens, it's you versus you, and you're just a bit more prepared than you were before. And fundamentally, we know, and typically they say in life, we have 5 extreme life events, whether it be death, accidents, cancer that happen to us. And you never wish for it around the corner. And everyone hopes come towards the end of the year, next year is going to be amazing. It's going to be the best year possible. And then you might have a reflection. We've all had it in our lives where we think, this year wasn't too good. But then from that suffering, when you can take yourself out that lens, and what happened to your daughter would have been, 27, 28 years ago?
Probably about 22. Yep.
22.
Yeah.
So it's...
When she was diagnosed, because it was a long road. Yeah.
How long?
From diagnosis, because she lost her eye, she had the eyes, and you're in and out of the hospital. Probably about 5 or 6 years.
How old is she now?
She's great. She's the one that works in a startup, and she's a go-getter. I mean, and like I said, I was telling you before the podcast began, she's a very pragmatic thinker. Like, she doesn't expect that life is always going to be good. In fact, and not in a negative way. It's just she has an armor. She's got prepared, what you're talking about. A lot of what that comes down to is resilience.
Absolutely.
How do I build my resilience? How do I build resilience for my children? That comes through as parents, as leaders. How do we do that? You don't want every problem to be solved by someone else for you. You kind of got to live through those tough times. And I think that's made her into a leader. I mean, I think that's why at 22, she started working for world famous scientists in their startup. I think for my other children, when you have a sick sister, the family views the rest of the world differently. Values, I guess, just came into full focus for me. I didn't necessarily call it values in my mind then, but the things that mattered and things that different people said to me, just stayed with me along the way. And I just think that it's an amalgamation of all these experiences that I thought, why can't I build something that seems so simple and operationalize it?
I would love to sit with her.
Yeah, definitely. I'll send it over to you.
Cool to see it.
I think even the funny thing is I some of the friends of mine that are in finance, I send it over to them if I can get them actually taking it. It's quick because it's
24 minutes.
Yeah, and it's a 4.5 minute animation. Takes a little longer because then your second activity might take you 6 minutes. So let's call it 30, 35 minutes. You can get extra time. People don't know that. Maybe 40. It's not taking a long time. We're taking those personality assessments, which aren't giving you, they're going to tell you what your personality is, but that's not giving you where you're living and working and how can you improve and how can you develop. I mean, for me, I wanted to create something that I say when I sell B2B is the life cycle of the employee, but I'm really creating something for the life cycle of life. Like, what do we do? Like, we're going to take 2 steps forward, 3 steps back a lot of times. But once again, it's noticing. It's noticing.
So you speak about values and you say, I'm sure you've taken your own test.
Yeah, I'm actually taking it again. It's like probably today, because somebody's going to give me a practice debrief.
And you must see evolution. It must be dynamic. I can't imagine it being static all the time. It's a case of where you're at in life and what changes for you.
Well, that's a good question. Values are fairly static.
Okay.
However, we'll go through transitions in our life, and then others come up
Exactly.
and others go away. I mean, no human has less than 5 or any more than 10 at any one time. My model is built on 50 years of values research. So yes, we do. Oftentimes you see, like in my prioritization process, you'll have a penultimate 16. There's a lot of shuffling sometimes between probably things that are in your top 16 versus your final 8. And very definitely, my model also isolates what we call lost or forgotten values. Values that people always have an aha moment. They're like, oh my gosh, because it opposes across the axis. Like I said, the model has 4 zones, 2 axes. Value, if you choose a certain blocker, it opposes values in the diagonal zone that you've just completely forgotten about. Like, oh yeah, I used to ride my bike. I was more adventurous. I used to go on like hiking trips with my buddies when I was 16, my mates, It's like those things. And I've never seen someone not have an aha moment. I mean, and I had to create it quick because I'm dealing with oftentimes high stakes professionals who give you 5 minutes of an attention span. So they can watch a 4.5 minute fun animation made by this great Malaysian guy for me. I mean, I've had just great resources, and I'm so blessed to have like a great team that are really committed to what we're doing.
So putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
And if we strip away the 8, if we put it down to 2 or 3, what are your top 2 or 3 values?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been asked before, and I think that my top 2 or 3 values would be kindness. To me is very important. I think that we go forward in any interaction we have with kindness. And I think that as a parent, that's the first thing that's important to me. I don't care who it is, whether it's the guy that's collecting, the garbage at school or the headmaster or whomever you're speaking to, you always go forward in kindness. Humility is very important to me because I think that when you have been blessed and, you and your partner or your family have done well, I mean, we need to be humble and we always go forward with humility because I think that's just good leadership. And I would say courageousness. I think courage underpins every value we have. If we don't have the courage to live better, if we don't have the courage to be kind, if we don't have the courage to say, I'm going to exert some power today. Power is not a number one value for a lot of people, but we have to have courage to activate any values in our life. I would say that. And I almost have a 4th, but I do think those are my top 3. And I think that 4th would be, and I've just come to this more when I'm, kind of preparing for some of the talks that I've been giving. I guess perseverance, as well, because if you don't persevere, and that's one of those things about when we're talking about resilience. I mean, we get knocked down a lot. I mean, people go to the gym and get fit and they get up early and go for a run and they go to, to their religious, institutions. Those are all part of what you were talking about with building that armor for that stoicism of preparing for that suffering that might come our way.
I love those 4 values. I would definitely put courage in my top 3 there.
Yeah, because it's what you're doing and what you're creating. You're running your own business and actually taking time to be interested in growth and what the world is doing and how they're achieving these things themselves. I mean, we only learn when we share our stories and we talk to each other. And I think that shows courage right now from you.
Speaking of resilience, you mentioned that was your 4th value.
Resilience, or perseverance is the value itself, but resilience.
Yeah, you're right.
Resilience is kind of the outcome.
Perseverance. Talking about that in your career, what was a moment where perseverance came through, and you're at the point where you're thinking, maybe I don't want to do this anymore, maybe I want to quit. But then you push through, and then you could look back, you could reflect on the moment and say, actually, that was worth everything.
In building Revaluate 180, or just in life in general?
Take away your personal life in your career. So this could be the business or this could be your professional career.
I mean, my professional career, like my first half of my professional career, I probably had 2 instances. I mean, I didn't love being a lawyer, but I love the way it taught me to think and research. I mean, I wouldn't be able to work with large language models like I do with AI right now if I didn't have my law degree. I mean, even in my own private work at home, notwithstanding like my the model that we use that's protected with our tech team in India to create, our feedback reports.
Yeah.
I had an individual I worked with early on, and when we were summer associates, and he liked me a lot as a person, but he decided himself that he didn't think I should be a lawyer, that it wasn't the right path for me.
Okay.
And I overheard him, as a young summer associate, so you're vying for a job.
So how old were you?
I was probably 23.
Okay.
I was in the middle of law school, maybe 22 going to 24, and I would overhear him actually try to dissuade other partners and other practice groups. And it was probably the bravest moment of my young life at that point. Is after, in early evening one day after work, I walked into his office and I said, I've overheard you almost blackball me. Is there a reason why you're doing that? I'm working really hard. And he's like, well, I don't think this is what you should be doing. I think you should be doing something different, better, something that's better for you. I said, you connect with people, you make them feel better. And I was like, but is that for you to decide, really? Is that for you to decide? And he was like, he thought about it. He said, actually, no, not really. And it's taking courage for you to come and tell me that. That was a turning point for me because I almost felt like giving up. So I was like, wow. I was at a very prestigious law firm at the time. My EQ definitely didn't hurt me, but I had to have the marks or the grades to get there. That was difficult, but I persevered, and I would have never been able to create what I've created. Like I said, I guess with Evaluate 180, my first iteration of the business, I had a business partner. We were very different. I really respected and loved her perseverance in life and where she had come from, and she was a police officer, and she'd done these amazing things and had some real hardships in her life. And I really felt like that made her be able to identify values and find the importance of them in life. And that ended up not working out. That was really hard for me because.
Why do you think it didn't work out?
I felt like she doubted herself a lot. It was something I feel this. It was based upon my research, my dissertation. And I think that since it was built on a lot of that, I think that she felt like she had to do a lot of catch up on that side, but she didn't realize how much I valued. She was doing so much of the logistics and so much of the lifting. And so I don't think she realized how much I appreciated that. So I just think maybe we weren't of like minds. I think we were like people. I think we're similar and we wanted similar things out of life. I don't think things like that are always supposed to work out, but that was really hard for me because first of all, I didn't even know if I was going to lose my business because I didn't know how we were going to break up amicably. And just, there were some legal ties that we had. And I thought, wow, I don't know how people go through a divorce in life because breaking up with a partner that was only a 2-year endeavor with her was mind bending and life altering, but got through it. So resilience, perseverance.
You spoke earlier about team infrastructure, and I can't remember who I'm quoting. I think it was someone like Mark Zuckerberg, but they were saying that the most important decision I ever made was the team that I built around me.
Yeah.
And I see so many solo entrepreneurs or smaller business owners who, as you were saying, essentially shouldering other people's problems and work. And my friend, he spoke about it really well. He said, monkeys on your back. He said, if you're the director, the CEO, the founder, whoever, and you're taking on everyone else's problems or challenges or their roles, you're putting all of these monkeys on your back. You try to run with monkeys on your back, you're not going to run very quickly. And it's there to have the right people in the right places. So
exactly.
Just talk to me a little bit about the importance of your team and what
well, precisely that's the importance of my model. When I'm making sales calls and I'm reaching out to leaders and C-suites and whatnot, I'm really talking about culture fit. What does your team makeup look? When you're bringing on a new team member, how are they even going to fit? Where is your team sitting with its values? And do they understand each other's values? And where do they sit with their biases? When you start to understand your own biases yourself, you start to look more inward. You become more mindful. You notice. And you have a new team member coming on board, you tend to treat them better because now you notice that maybe some of your behaviors are affecting them. So for me, among my team, I think it's about really not micromanaging, having trust, really knowing what's going on in all aspects of your business, but really I have the forest walker. Okay. The forest blocker in my model is somebody who gets attached to a single little detail and they really are going to drive that home until they can figure it out. They're often not looking at the whole picture and they can really derail a project or themselves. I do that sometimes. I know that. So I stepped away from being day to day with the tech team, with the LLM, because I was going to maybe be too particular. And actually when you scale, you have to, sacrifice some of that fine tuning detail. You're never going to get that I could get with handwriting, doing my own kind of, nitpicking, fixing of things. So I think it's deciding what is the challenge that you should be taking on. Right now, for me, I got to move my business. I got to sell my business because the founder sells the business. I have to shout from the rooftops what I'm building, what I believe in. But team fit and team management is the only way to have profitable, productive teams. It's just the only way. It's the only way that team members feel like they're stakeholders. When they matter to the team leader and you start to see how you all fit together, that creates culture. And when you have culture, you have buy-in. You have stakeholders. You have the young Gen Zers, texting, social media out there. Like, there's a great company to work for. I love it here. I feel like I'm a real member. I feel like my opinion matters. That's why I always tell CEOs or C-suites or leaders I'm talking to, it's very important for the C-suite to do my model. We can create a heat map. We can see where all of your values are even aligned as C-suite members, as teammates. Are we aligned? If they're not aligned, what do we do? And which ones should we be highlighting? And each of us should highlight the ones that are most natural to us. Are our behaviors matching these things? But I think more important than that, if we're building strong teams, it's bottom up. It just really is. It's what does the organization feel? How do they become productive, contributing members? How do we unify an organization? How do we unify a team? And we can do that through value alignment and then, uncovering and honing unconscious bias.
Saw a really interesting graph the other day where it had essentially just an organizational chart and it spoke about delegation. It was like, would you delegate? If everyone continues to delegate critical things that were important, that made it all the way down to the intern. Realistically, would you trust an intern to do the job of a founder or a CEO? No. And this is it. It's about empowering people to work in their zone of expertise, be exceptional what they do, as opposed to try and spread people thin.
Right.
And I know that was one of the mistakes I made in my early years. I try to find generalists. I try to find a Swiss Army knife, and quite often, if you get one, then great. But often, and this is how I think, maybe this is where the gig economy comes into it. If you find people who are experts on what you're looking for, especially AI, if you would rather someone who has been just entrenched in AI for the last 36 months, that's all they've done, and then they've gone in, and that's why now you see, I believe it was Meta signed, or they poached someone from another company for more than Cristiano Ronaldo's fee from Manchester United to Real Madrid back in 2009, because they know the impact of this person. This person, they're signing someone for £80 million, then that person should be bringing at least $1 billion or pounds into the company.
Right. I mean, I think that's exactly it. And this is what I talk a lot about too when I'm pitching my ideas as well, is we have to energize people in the role that they're in. Okay. We have to create value driven and purposeful roles. So their contribution doesn't have to be the holy grail, like the guy that's getting paid $80 million, but they need to feel like, that their input makes a difference. And that comes down to recognizing people's input and saying, hey, I really appreciated that note you sent up the line and the research you did on such and such. I mean, that comes down to the leadership. I mean, that guy that's making $80 million, likely speaking, if he's out there and done that well, he's had some really good, unless he just is working in a an isolation and is just so amazing. And obviously that's worth paying for. But typically high paid leaders and people who've been very successful in their life, they recognize people for their work. And then that's how those people grow. That's how they grow. That's how they become masters and experts in their field, or even choose something different because they're like, I've enjoyed this and I've learned a lot, but now it's time for me to expand. I'm going to take a sideways move. I'm going to do a lateral move because I find this more interesting,
for you right now with your business, what was the hardest scaling stage?
The hardest scaling stage has been how to actually pitch the business. I know that sounds crazy.
Okay.
Because AI has been a difficult, I wouldn't say difficult, it's been an interesting scale. I started with a guy who came in that I knew as a lawyer, he was a partner when I was a young associate, and I actually took his office when he moved into a partner office. And then 30 years later, he's creating empathetic avatars. He had this business, and he saw my model and said, wow, I'm having empathetic avatars. You should be having avatars deliver your model. And I would never have built my large language model. He wasn't even doing some of the conversational. He was doing conversational agentic AI, but he wasn't creating these large language models that were thinking and interpreting, right? But for me, I think the hardest part of my business for scaling has been what is my product and what am I selling, and knowing my audience. Because I used to spend a lot of time telling people everything that we do and what like what's important. I mean, we got values, we have unconscious bias. We're going to increase ROI for you. That's
you're selling the bells and whistles, but fundamentally, what's the biggest impact? What's the biggest lever that people care about?
That's rudimentary, but I don't think it is. I think in a startup, knowing what your mission. My mission was a well-being model when I started, and I was with my husband. Like we'd be walking. He was writing a book during a sit-out. He was at a big hedge fund and at a sit-out, and he wrote a very successful book in finance.
What's the book called?
The book's called Fed Up, and it's about it's like a I can't think of the exact terminology of the literature, but it's real market views. So he was with an imaginary or a fictional team, but an amalgamation of all the people he'd worked for in his career. So he followed the market trends during the pandemic and the crazy things that were going on, and how they're using it across universities across the world, some places. And I think he was on a bestseller for finance. I mean, it's really, I think you'd have fun reading it. It's called Fed Up. But I think that when he was doing that, I was talking about well-being. That's the most important thing. Like, of course it is. You model, because that should be the nice side effect. How are you going to hire talent? How are you going to, and I didn't, for some reason, I knew all those terms and I was an employment lawyer. It made sense, but it didn't finally click to me that what I'm doing is I am basically retaining and developing talent. I'm making your organizations places where people want to stay. And when they want to stay, they become producers when they feel noticed and valued, and you have them in the right spot on the team. So I think that that was the hardest part of scaling for me, and that's made a big difference.
And for you now, and naturally it's an evolving piece. The model that you have now will probably look a little bit different in 24 months' time. It'll iterate, it will improve naturally. How do you sell what you do right now?
Well, how I sell what I do right now is like I know what my customer wants. So if I'm going into finance, if I'm going to a hedge fund, I know they want P&L, and I need to tie my metrics to P&L. I mean, I can't say I'm not giving you a mathematical model to increase P&L, but I know that if we put team members in the right spot, we figure out what's going on with them, where their unconscious biases are. When they know more about themselves, they're going to produce more, and it's that team that we're working with. Their P&L is going to go up. It's going to happen. So when I can tie things to things like P&L, when I go into other, larger organizations, a lot of times it's thinking about KPI. Why is a team sitting in London reaching their KPIs while the team in New York is not? Like, what does the team look like? What is the makeup of the team? How do we develop the team so it looks like, or it doesn't have to be exactly like it, but resembles why this other team is performing across the globe? It just depends on my story. If I'm going into a C-suite, they have a lot of and they have a lot of, I would say, issues with like creating diverse teams. It's a lot of white men a lot of times in private equity, not always, and how do you keep people to stay because they burn out young people like big banks do, right? So how do we do that? So with C-suite talents or private equity, it's more about building that C-suite group. Like this is a small group of people and we need to really be on the same page. Are our values aligned? What are our biases going into these meetings? I need to know yours and your mine so we can be effective when we're pitching clients ourselves. So I guess it's just since my model basically is an assessment tool that can help do what I call job candidate alignment analysis and hire. It's a retention tool because we can figure out what is this a culture fit? What are people's strengths? What are their weaknesses? How do we hone their biases? Then we can work with it. We can make, the team better. It depends on, like, essentially, I've even been able to work with some companies with severance. People are leaving a job and they feel terrible, right? They've been made redundant and it's it doesn't matter if they hated the job. Rejection is a horrible, terrible thing. And when somebody's telling you you're not good enough, you have to leave. If you could give them my model, even before they go to outplacement, because they don't get anything on outplacement because they're jaded, they're angry, they're upset. If you give my model and you let them remember the things that they do well and what they truly value, and then tell them, well, these are some of your biases. Maybe they had an impact on why you weren't successful in this particular job. They can go out kind of with a roadmap. Okay, well, you know what? This was helpful. I can go into outplacement. I can go into my next interviews and I kind of have a feeling of where I would succeed.
Curious, a bit of a backwards lens question, and I love just the different perspectives. What advice would you give to 20-year-old Tia?
I think I'd give 20-year-old Tia, and one of the reasons why I created the model is you can't be all things to all people. You can't solve everybody's problems. You can't make everybody happy. I think when I was a little girl, I remember my mother saying to me, maybe grade 1, Tia, you have a gift. You know how to make people feel comfortable and accepted and happy. And that became almost like a burden. She was right. And those were blessings that I had, and I needed to share those with the world. But I needed to have some, maybe close my doors a bit, put up my windows. And frankly, it's why I built my model. It gives me a bit of an arm's length. I want to help people, but I want to give them a self-help tool as well. And I can help more people if I can create a style of living that I think will move them forward, will give them growth. You want to end with something like that.
Yeah, it's similar to the analogy of you can lead a horse to water, you can't teach it to drink.
Yeah.
And it's, or give a man a fish. Eats for a day, teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime, so to speak. So
right, and that's why I told you before we started that my youngest daughter's always frustrated with me and coined that term that I'm selflessly selfish. So it's a kind of an inverted compliment. You're selfless, Mom, because you do want to, you stop, you listen, you notice. But are you taking away from some of the people that you should be spending time with, and the people at home, your close family and friends? Are they being neglected because you're out there trying to save the universe? So.
Yeah, what's next for you, and where can people find you?
I'm here in London. I'm in Miami for a couple months in the winter. We work from there. They can find me on my website, evaluate180.com. They can see me. They can join my newsletter. I write thoughts on, what I'm thinking is going on in the workplace and the most important things you can do to retain, develop, keep talent, those types of things. And they can find me in your podcast, Joe.
They can indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.